On episode 236 of the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, we speak to author Reiner Lomb, and he's going to talk about the 7 different emotional states and behaviors, which is going to inspire and aspire you and your team to great heights. Are you ready for this one, folks? All right, let's do it. Welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, a weekly podcast series dedicated to helping you hit peak performance across the 3 domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. This podcast couples my 20 years of military experience as a senior Canadian Army officer with world-class guests to bring you the most complete podcast of leadership going. And for more, feel free to check out our website at movingforwardleadership.com. And with that, let's get to the show. Yes, it is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and thanks for coming out to the podcast. It's so great to have you here, as always. Got a couple announcements before we dive into today's podcast episode. And the first one is a big one in that if you're following me in real time, note the website issue is almost resolved. Thank God. And honestly, thank you for your support. Holy cow. I got people messaging me like John and letting me know, hey, sorry, is there anything I could do? So on and so forth. I truly appreciate you all who are out there and care enough to, even just say, hey, sorry, that sucks. Wish there was something I could do to help you. But nonetheless, you know what? Quick leadership lesson out of this whole fiasco, we'll call it. And that is, 1, you always need to have a plan. I had a plan as soon as this occurred. 2 is you got to look for the opportunity within the challenge. And I even talk about this in the upcoming episode. And when the website crashed, I realized that, the opportunity here is for me to rebuild it from the ground up and learn. And after I've learned so much and so much that I could fix a lot of things that weren't not necessarily broken per se, but just not done that well. And then I guess the final thing is that, you got to remain calm in the face of adversity. I could have lost my mind, but what good would have that done? And think about your own challenges as a leader that you face. When you see big adversity, such as something as epic as a complete website crash, come to you. If you're not calm, you're not going to be able to think straight. And if you can't think straight, you're not going to be able to overcome the challenge that's in front of you. So that's my quick lessons learned, per se, out of this fiasco. Anyway, it's back up and running. We are at probably around the 85% solution right now. Got a lot of things on the back end that we need to fix back up, per se. But no doubt we'll get there. Within the next week or 2, we'll be there. And we'll be 100% back up and running. But again, thank you to all of you for your support. It has been fantastic. All right, let's dive into today's episode, shall we? And today we're talking to author Reiner Lomb. He's German by background, and he does have an accent on here, which is fantastic because I'm super excited. I love Germany, and I'm soon going to be visiting Germany for work again in the near future. So it's great. And my apologies, Reiner, if I still have not pronounced your name right. Anyway, so who is he? He's the executive coach. He's been around. He's worked for HP. He works with leaders and changemakers in a huge range of organizations and multinational companies. He's got over a 30-year career in tech and helped start it and develop software businesses, and as well as led their leadership development, 20 of which was at the company Hewlett Packard, which I'm pretty sure you've probably heard of once or twice. So in this conversation, we talk about the 7 different leadership behaviors, emotional states, which drive action, and those being empathy, compassion, interest, optimism, inspiration, trust, and positivity. And we talk about different topics such as, how to be empathetic, how you can be too empathetic, how to be compassionate, and how to be interesting, and different ways you can inspire others, and then finally how you can breed positivity into your organization. So this is a great conversation, and we go really deep at one point. I mean, I won't lie, I was starting to get tears in my eyes at one point in this conversation. So you definitely want to stick through this whole one to hear about one of his, we trade stories, emotional stories near the end, and you're going to want to hear them. So with that, I guess it's time for you to sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Reiner Lomb, all about how you can aspire to be a leader. Reiner, sir, welcome to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. So good to have you here.
Pleasure to be with you, Scott.
So today we're talking about your book, Aspire, where you get into basically different characteristics and such of, aspirational leadership. And I guess out of the gate, what I'd like to know is, how did you come up with this list of 7 in the first place? Why 7? Why those ones? Where did that even come from?
That's a wonderful question. So scientists research in emotional psychology. They still find new emotions all the time, and some are different in cultural context. But there is you can say there's over 200, maybe over 250 different emotions. And as I've been a leader myself. I have been building software businesses, starting them and helping to grow them into 100 millions and even billion-dollar businesses. And I have been coaching leaders and developing leaders. And so the question for me that always came up is leadership is for me to come up with a vision, an aspirational vision, and then influence people to change their behavior in order to make that vision a reality, right? So it's about behavior change. So I was looking about what are the essential leadership behaviors that allow a leader to create that type of change. And so as I have been doing innovation, have been coaching people, have been researching, I identified those 7 emotional states that are most essential for driving the leadership behaviors to make that change a reality.
Yeah. So change management obviously is absolutely huge as the leader, because as I often say, the world's ever evolving. It's constantly changing. Heck, we get off this podcast and something could happen that caused a great change in the world today. So that list of 7 emotional behaviors, what are they for the listener out there?
Yeah. So I distinguish between the emotions that drive the behavior and the leadership behavior itself. So let me explain them in maybe in blocks of 3. So the foundational, so they almost like built like a pyramid in the book itself. But the 3 foundational are empathy, compassion, and interest. Empathy drives caring. A leader must care. Otherwise, people will not trust the leader. If a leader doesn't care, you know that from your military career. uh, Now, caring is not enough, right? Somebody might care and not do anything about it. On top of caring, a leader must commit to action, to serve the people he or she is leading. That takes compassion. Compassion commits people to serve, a leader to serve. The third one, a leader must also understand what he is leading, what he is about, the issues, the challenges, coming up with solutions and a new vision to overcome those issues. And that's why interest is critical. Interest is the emotion that helps a leader to understand, to not give up until the leader really understands. It's more than curiosity. It's actually a more sustained interest in a topic to deeply understand it. So those 3, empathy, compassion, and interest, drive caring, commitment to serving, and a deeper understanding, so that a leader can come up with an aspirational vision that overcomes those issues he or she is dealing with. Right now, on top of that, now with that foundation, a leader can create an aspirational new future, can create a vision of an aspirational new future where those issues are overcome and solved and the needs of the people are met, that takes optimism. Without optimism, a leader is not able to see a future, not even able to look into the future, right? So we have that very often. We have leaders that are looking backwards. They live in resentment, right? They try to recreate the past, right? So, but you need to create a new future. That takes optimism, but optimism is not enough. If you have a vision that aligns with the needs of the people, then you need to mobilize people, and that takes inspiration. Inspiration drives that sustained commitment, that sustained interest in people to do something, to follow you, to make that vision reality. Now, when people are mobilized, and let's say you have a startup or in the military, you have a group of people that you have a mission, you still need to coordinate effective actions, and that takes trust. And trust is a very complex emotion. There's different dimensions of trust. Does the leader care? Is the leader competent? Is he reliable? And etc. etc. So trust drives or fuels collaboration. Without trust, with distrust, collaboration is not possible. Right? So that's the next three: optimism, inspiration, and trust. They drive visioning, mobilization, and collaboration. And the last one is really a palette of emotions. It's positivity. It's a palette of positive emotions. They might include joy, optimism, gratitude, hopefulness, etc., etc. There's a whole range of positive emotions. They drive resilience, and resilience is important. As you know, you might have a plan. You everybody goes in the right direction, and something happens. This disrupts you, and you need to change your plans, right? And that's where resilience is necessary in order to overcome adversities, roadblocks. We have experiences with the pandemic. We have experiences with the war in the Ukraine. Suddenly, the economy is disrupted, and everybody is scrambling. And so you need to be able to come up with a new plan. The vision does not change, right? The vision is still the same, but the plan, how you get there, that will change. And that resilience allows you to do that as a leader.
That's an awesome list. Like I can see how one builds onto the next, onto the next, onto the next, right? And you get
Yeah,
to that final point. And I think resilience,
absolutely.
your final point about resilience is spot on. It was interesting. I recently was doing advanced management program out of the U.S. Navy. Actually, I got invited down, and we did like one of those self test type thing, and apparently I don't have much resilience or adaptability. And I was like, due to, for ambiguous situations. And I was like, what? Like, this is where I live. This is what I do on a
Mhm.
day to day basis. But upon further reflection and speaking with the instructor of the day, I realized we come to the realization it's not that I can't deal with ambiguous or I'm not resilient, but rather I strive to clarify immediately that ambiguous and that's where my resiliency came from. So as you were speaking about that memory just popped back in my mind, and I thought it was very interesting. Uh,
Yeah,
but back to your list here. So empathy, compassion, interest, optimism, inspiration, trust, positivity, which of course then rolls into resilience. Let's talk a bit about empathy first, because I feel like this
hmm,
is a huge hot topic this day and age. A lot of
yeah,
people talk about emotional intelligence, which of course empathy, is a part of. Now, I guess the pessimistic side of me or the critical person in me would say, well, it's just work. Why do I need to be empathetic? You show up, I give you tasks, you do the tasks, we all
yeah.
go home. Like I don't need someone crying on my shoulder or anything like that. Like, why is empathy even important? And for you, like, why should I even care about empathy? How is that going to inspire people?
Yeah, it is. It's really. This is a good question because there's also in the media we read about that empathy can become negative. No, that it let's say the healthcare profession, if somebody is too empathetic and too much caught up in the pain of the person they are serving, they cannot serve anymore. So first of all, I have to say it needs to be balanced out. Me as a coach as well, I deal a lot with difficult situation where I coach somebody who goes through a hard time, I need to show empathy. And I'm going to come to answer your question in a minute, but that I need to have empathy, to put myself into the shoes of that person, to understand the person, what the person is feeling, what the person is thinking, what the needs are, what the person is going through, so that I can help shift that person, its emotional state. But the empathy helps me to understand in what emotional state the person is. I can feel the emotion just enough to know it and to care about the person. If I can feel what the person is feeling, if I know what the person is feeling, and I find out that feeling, that emotion, that the state that the person is in is not useful for what the person wants to achieve. Again, emotions drive behavior, and you can learn to shift your emotions. I can then help to shift that person to the emotional state that is more useful. I'd like to give you an example. Let's call him Jack. He was a senior executive in a company, reporting to the CEO of the organization, and he when we started coaching initially, his boss, also, he worked like 17 hours a day, like 7 days a week, hard driver. The boss constantly complained about him not doing enough, not being leader. Okay, so the person, he was not aware of what emotional state he was in. So the first conversation with him, I tried to figure out what emotional state is he in and why can he not lead. Okay, what is the issue, and so on. And I found out that from the stories he told me, he couldn't name his emotions, that he was in resentment. Now, resentment is the emotion of victimhood, and that was understandable because he felt a victim of the behavior of his boss that constantly asked him he's not leading enough. Also, he was working already his butt off, in quote. And so, but with living in resentment, he could not he could not look forward. He could not lead. He could not move to a forward-looking emotion like optimism, right? Which is critical to be a visionary leader, for example. So the point is, my empathy allowed me to pick up on his resentment, to feel his resentment through our interaction, his body language, the words he said, how the energy that I picked up, and allowed me then to identify an emotion that is more helpful. So helped him to first to recognize that this was not a useful emotion, the one that was more useful, and some intermediate steps in order to get to optimism. In this case, you go from resentment first to acceptance, accepting that my boss treated me badly in the past and I cannot change that. I accept that. Not that I like it, but I accept that it happened in the past and I cannot change it. Now, from that emotion of acceptance, I can then shift to more future oriented, forward looking emotions such as an optimism. And that is exactly what he did. But my empathy allowed me to identify that, to feel that. And the same is for any leader. If you, as a leader, influence people, you want to mobilize people, and they're not mobilized, they're not inspired, for example, they don't show the behavior you want them to show. You can, through empathy, you can put yourself into their shoes, understand where they are with their thoughts, with their both cognitively as well as from an emotional empathy perspective, and then you can help them shift.
That makes a lot.
Without empathy, you cannot do that.
No, it makes absolute sense. Makes and I really enjoy the story. Now, before you dove deep into that story, you said something that was interesting to me, and that was, we can also show too much empathy. So you just showed a great story of showing enough empathy and understanding, your client's emotional state and stuff like this to get to the core root problem, which is what we coaches do. But as the leaders out there, at what point can they recognize, or what point is it that they go showing too much empathy, as you kind of hinted at, and how can they catch themselves before they go down that route?
Yeah. So the too much would be, let's say, let's back to that situation. If I would suffer so much with the other person that I could not think clearly, that I would fall into this depressive state, into this, like that I would take on his resentment towards his boss, for example, right? If I would suddenly feel resentment towards his boss, if I would feel it really deeply inside, then I could not think clearly about how to move him out of it. Okay, I couldn't see future possibilities, and it's just from an emotional state, from a psychological state that I would be in. So how do you do that? To I First of all, I'm aware of it. I don't let myself getting caught up in the story. I feel the emotion, but I don't allow myself to get stuck in it. No, I just feel it enough. So there's two differences when we talk about emotions. One is the mood, which is an emotional state that is more pervasive, and that can actually lead to an ongoing barrier to certain behavior, leadership behavior. Or you just have in a moment, you feel an emotion, and it's just in a moment, and then it goes away and you shift to another emotion or to another set of emotions, right? So that second one is that's what I'm doing. I just pick up the emotion just enough to understand it, so that I can then actually be of help.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. Basically, you get to the point where you're being impacted, being so empathetic, you're actually being impacted with the other person's situation.
Yeah, if I suffer deeply with this person, that does not mean that I become dehumanize the whole thing. This is I still feel
Yeah,
for the
absolutely.
person, but I don't get caught up in it.
Yeah,
No.
you're able to still kind of have that 30,000 foot view of the situation, see it in its entirety, whereas the other person could be completely into the weeds of it, and
Yeah,
and really
yeah,
drawn in,
yeah,
and you're able, as a
yeah,
leader, the important part here is being empathetic, understand their situation, but then help guide them to see the full situation. And I
yeah.
guess that then would kind of dovetail right into compassion, right? Because now you're being compassionate with them, you're having an understanding with them. So, how as leaders, how might we use compassionate to be inspirational and help people buy into the vision?
Yeah, so the compassion really comes in. So compassion includes empathy. It builds on empathy. So empathy is an important part. That's why I build it first to make a leader care. The compassion adds then the commitment to say, okay, I care. Let's say, for example, let's say somebody you love or care about that, like calls you and says, "Oh, my mother died," for example, or an important person died. Now, you would have empathy with the person because the person is close to you, and you would care about it. But you would sit on the phone, but you didn't know what to do. But if you say like, "Oh, through empathy, I'm finding out what the person really needs, and I make the commitment to act on it." So, for example, let's say the person is alone at home, and you say, "I'm should I come over and cook you a meal, or just be by your side and talk?" Right? And the person says, "Oh, that would be nice if you could come." And so that's basically when you add the commitment to serve, which is basically compassion. Or you see a child, mother's crying and the child fell into the water and is drowning, and she calls for help, and empathy makes you care about it, and you feel that pain of the mother, right? Kind of the fear and the panic. But it's the compassion that takes you, let's say you take a stick or a rope or whatever, or you walk into the water and pull the child out. Very important in leadership, right? Kind of to take those two steps, which basically is the emotion that allows you to be a servant leader.
Now, it makes absolute sense because leadership is more than just the 9 to 5, the office. It's having understanding of people's personal lives and knowing where they're at, because we're not robots. We take our baggage home, to work with us, and then we take our work baggage to home with us. So, having that compassion can definitely not just inspire, but it makes that deep connection and bond between you, the leader, and your team members, so that they become loyal to you because you're loyal to them.
Yes.
And that's a bit, to be loyal, you also have to be compassionate, understanding that they have a sick kid at home, for example, like I did yesterday. It was no big deal. Stayed home, took care of my kid, but I show up and like,
Yeah.
I still get the job done.
Yeah, and this is what you said, something wonderful. It's like, everybody talks about the great resignation and companies struggling for talent, right? We have the baby boomers retiring, and we have these, economic issues and everything. But like if a leader is caring and committed to serve, and in that way, and it's really authentic, the people are more likely to stay with that leader, right?
Absolutely.
They return the loyalty, the commitment in another way, and they will be much more emotionally engaged. And emotional engagement is much more powerful than rational engagement. Rational means I do the work just to make a living, for example, or to have a job so that I can pay off my mortgage or whatever. That's more rational engagement. Emotionally means like you're really emotionally engaged in the work. You care about it.
No, absolutely. And I discussed that in length in many previous episodes, the Great Resignation and how having compassion leads to loyalty. And when you have loyalty, that keeps people around because they like where they're at, right? We don't know the other side. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. But if they're loyal to you, it'll be a huge feeling to them of leaving. Now that being said, I even talk about loyalty when someone does leave, and you can still keep those bonds. I have a former employee of mine, someone who worked directly for me, and she moved on, and I was happy for her. Well, guess who still keeps getting requests for character, as a reference? And it's been
Yeah.
a while since she's worked for me. But if I ever have an opening there in my organization where she would be a great fit, well, guess who I'd be letting know? And I'm pretty sure she'd be applying pretty quick, right? Because we have that loyalty, that
Yeah, I
compassion.
like that example. Yeah, I like that example because very often people don't think beyond that current commitment or relationship they have in that specific role. But the world is much bigger, right? People move on, they might rejoin again at a later point in time. I have had employees or colleagues and so on that I have rehired over time for new projects. Today, I do large projects, and I hire people, contractors, and so on, and we reform all the time. So it's a long-term relationship, and you might break up now because there's no project, but maybe a year later you have another project together. And same with in fixed employment, right? Somebody might leave you, but you might meet at another opportunity.
Absolutely, right. I often refer to them as friends in court. They could be at another company, and maybe um, you might be able to call on that company, and then suddenly you got an easy deal or easier deal because you've dealt with that person in the past. So there's so many great advantages to not just shooing people away or getting angry when they decide to leave, but rather being happy for them and being loyal to them in their departure, which boils down to this leadership behaviors that we're talking about here today. I'd like to dive now into interest, which is the next one. I'm going to hit a couple more of these because there's a couple there I believe the leader out there wants to dive deeper into. Interest is definitely one. How can we spark people's interest? How can we be interesting to our people, especially when we spend so much time with them? How do we go actually about achieving interest in your mind?
Yeah, yeah, and this is a fast. Each of these emotions are fascinating and deep in their from psychological research perspective. Obviously, I dove deep into each of what that means. But interest, first of all, it came. Why I added it there? It came from that I have met many leaders in my life, so-called leaders, who did not understand what they were talking about. They were given a challenge. They signed up for a challenge or for a job, and did not show the interest, really understanding deeply. So what does interest mean? What should a leader understand? He should understand the needs of the people he or she is leading, whose life he or she is trying to change. Right. So if I'm innovating and come up with a new product, a new service, or solutions, whatever, I need to I need to be interested in the people whose life I'm affecting. The impact I have, right? So it's understanding their needs, how they're feeling about this, what the issues are. But I also need to be able to understand the systems and solutions I'm creating, right? And so I have seen too many leaders, so-called leaders, that did not understand what they were talking about. And one reason was they were not interested in it. Right? They were interested in the leadership position, maybe in the level, that it gave them, the respect or whatever, maybe the money, maybe, because they wanted to move up in society, whatever. And I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean, just saying there was if the interest lacks, it's very hard to understand if you don't have it. You know that from school, right? When you were sitting in a class, did you do well in a class that you were not interested in a topic? I didn't.
God, no.
I was only doing well in those where I really had a deep interest in. I was passionate about understanding that, right? And so the same here with leaders. It's true for anybody. And now, how can you cultivate interest? You need to connect it. You connect this topic or the person that you are need to be interested in that you're leading with something that's important to you, right? So that goes back to the caring. That's the reason why I built this caring and then commitment to serving and understanding on top of each other. Because if you care and you have a commitment to serve, you will have automatically a higher interest, right? So if you're committed to serve somebody's need, you will be more interested. If you have that commitment, you will be more interested to understand the need. What does this person really need in this moment? We talked about your friend whose mother died, for example. If you're committed to serve this person's needs, you will say, you will ask, what do you need right now? What do you need most right now? Where can I help? Maybe your friend gets already help from another relative in some area. Maybe somebody's cooking already a meal, but maybe the person just needs to organize the funeral, or buy the flowers. So I don't know all the issues, how overwhelming it can be, and it's a emotional, difficult state in that moment. So asking and trying to find out what the person needs. So that interest makes you understand it, but it comes from that you're committed to serve that person and that you deeply care.
I really enjoyed all of that. And I feel, yeah, well, the audience probably could hear me roll my eyes when you talked about how the leaders that weren't interested in what they were doing and had no idea, right? It's just, you're not leading at all. You're just showing up, like you said, and collecting a paycheck and going home at the end of the day. And you're not going to be inspirational, which
Yes.
is later in the list if you're not interested. But being interested in your people, and such an easy way to achieve this is, I talk about this tactic all the time, and that's the first 30 minutes of the day. First 30 minutes of the day, don't do work, but rather talk to your team. And don't talk about work to your team. Talk about their lives and be interested in them. How was their evenings? How was their weekends? How was their kids? What sports are they into? Did they watch the game the night before? Whatever. But just kind of going back to showing a little bit of empathy, trying to make that connection with them, have an understanding who they are, having an understanding what's going on in their life, so that when the time comes, you have an understanding who they are, you have a connection, you have a bond, there's trust built, and then you can go, okay, yeah, or your mother died, how can I help? you know
Right. And this is a wonderful example, right? It's kind of, and that can extend actually to what you're working right now. What are you possibly struggling with, or why are you working on what you're working on? Why are you passionate about it? Why are you passionate about it? So that opens up new opportunities for you to understand, and as a leader to be more connected with the people. But also it allows for the person to share, and then for you to share how the person's work fits into the larger mission of the organization, into the vision. You can actually be of support in terms of coaching and so on. So this kind of what you're explaining in the morning, this 30-minute conversation or in between. We call it at Hewlett Packard, where I worked for 24 years as a leader in different leadership roles. We call it like management by walking around. And Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett invented it there, or they cultivated it there. But all the managers were at that time were cultivating it, and so you had a close connection to the people, and that all automatically created higher empathy and care, and a higher commitment to serve as well, and cultivated interest, and then cultivated better understanding.
No, it's fantastic. Interest is absolutely crucial to developing that high performing team for sure. Now, I'm going to jump over optimism because I think the leader out there has a good understanding of what optimism is and why it's important to them. But inspiration as a whole, I think this is where a lot of people leaders uh, probably struggle because it's like
Yeah,
how can I be inspirational? Not every one of us is the Elon Musk out there, or pick one, anyone, but rather it's difficult to be inspirational, or the tactics they use just aren't connecting with their team. So for the leader out there who's striving, trying to be inspirational but doesn't quite know how to do it, or might have a bit of a shell on them, how can they get past that and actually become inspirational
yeah,
to their team?
yeah. This is an excellent question, because inspiration very often we associate with more charismatic leaders. That's one way to inspire. That's one way, but it's only one way. There's many other ways. And what I when I coach people is to say, like, the way you inspire, the approach you take to inspire people needs to fit your style. So I had leaders that managers that was reporting to that I thought were great leaders that inspired me. They were not charismatic leaders. They were competent. They were great role models in terms of integrity and care and compassion. They were, let's say, they would lend an ear when I needed that. They would show interest. Uh, so that could be a way to inspire, that inspired me, or others would inspire me through their great, because they were experts in the field, and I say I could go to them and I could learn something from them that I could not learn anywhere else. Right. So this is through expertise and through competence. And so it needs to fit to the style of the leader. And I describe that actually in the book itself, the different ways how somebody can choose their own style and the combinations of activities that fit to them and they can learn to inspire others. Now, in general, like if I take it one layer up, what I found in common is that the leader, if you can, let's say, go back to the vision for a moment, the vision that you have as a leader, what you are out to create for the organization. And if you can align that vision with the highest aspirations of the people that you're leading, right, what they are personally aspiring to, and what you are aspiring to with your organizations, if you can create an alignment there and you can communicate it in a way that it is clearly understood, and very often it needs to be reinforced multiple times, and also always be realigned, right? It's kind of a continuous work. That is always a way to inspire. Right? If you think about, Scott, you have something you dream of in the world that you are totally passionate about, an aspiration that's much bigger than yourself, and you work for an organization whose vision is aligned with that, you will be fired up. Nobody needs to motivate you in the morning. If you know that, if you see that connection, how what you try to achieve is aligned with what the organization tries to achieve, you're going to go out of bed in the morning, and nobody needs to push you out. Right?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
absolute sense. And I really like the point that there's more than one way to inspire. We don't have to be that rah 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 leader. And I would argue
No.
it's not even appropriate at all the times. Like I, I believe I'm a bit of a charismatic guy. So when I give presentations and stuff, they're always dynamic, and people I'm throwing out jokes, and I've always been told that it's always a good time. And I was actually preparing one today for one I have to give in a few weeks, and I gave it last year, and they asked me to come back again. But at the same time, that's I can't show up every day and be that way. I have to be fit the situation too. And sometimes it's kind of like what you said. Sometimes I inspire by leading by example, sitting there and getting my work done and making sure things are lined up, making sure my team understands the goals that they're achieving and how it fits with the bigger picture, making sure everyone's lined up, applying people's strengths to where I need them to be, and sometimes getting them to see that their weaknesses are not as great as what they think they are, and sometimes it's just a simple, accountability poke. So I host a mastermind community where we get together weekly, we go over content, and one of the things I do is ask for, okay, anyone want accountability this week? And one of the members said, yeah, I want accountability because I'm going to go to this new pool, but I'm hesitant, and blah blah blah, excuse. And I'm sure she's listened to this and didn't say excuses, but in her mind it was all reasons. I said, well, it sounds like to me there's a bit of a imposter syndrome there. You think you're not good enough to go to this pool. And long story short, it was just that little bit of accountability inspired her to go to the pool. And guess what? She did a live video in our private group, and she's like, it was awesome. I had a great time. It was not scary. And it was just that little bit of accountability inspired her to, push her out of her comfort zone. So, right,
Wonderful.
there's different ways to do it. It's just a matter of the
Yeah,
situation.
like what you said about strengths, no? Like if you tap into the strengths of a person with the task they need to achieve, if you use their strengths, they feel also inspired because then they're not afraid. But if you ask them to do something and that is their weakness and they don't know how to do it, they will not be inspired. They will possibly give up, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's also that's back to empathy of a leader, really to understand, to pick up where the person that you're leading is,
It
right?
all comes together, right? Like I know you have gone and you've kind of laid them out, and you got your pyramid and all that. But at the end of the day, it all blends together when you start talking. You actually put the action, but you have to have an understanding of the differences to actually put it all together and move forward. With that, I do want to wrap up here with positivity, because I think that is super important, especially today. Like, we need positive leaders out there. The tagline of this show is literally lead, don't boss. And I think you can understand why it's that, right? Like,
Yeah,
we need leaders out there. We need positive leaders out there. There's so much negativity. The looming, slash recession that's here. You mentioned the war in Ukraine that is impacting so many people. It's impacting the world one way or another. The financial stock crash. If you're into the crypto market, that is completely fell right out. And the Great Recession. Now we're talking about all kinds of other things. There's so many reasons to not be positive. But us as leaders, if we want to inspire, we want to have trust, we want to create optimism, all this stuff, we do need to breed positivity. So I'd love to hear your
yeah.
thoughts for the listener out there on how we can go about that.
Yeah, so it's I need to make clear that it's not about toxic positivity that we're talking about here. Toxic positivity, just to put that aside, is about where you don't allow any negative feelings to come up, and they're covered up basically, right? So if there's resentment in an organization and not allowed to talk about it and make you make like everything is fine, but not everything is fine. No, we're not talking about that type of positivity because that's not real positivity, because there's under the surface, there's negativity cooking, no, boiling. No, what we're talking here about is, let's say, negative things happen. Let's say you come tomorrow to work, you had a plan to execute, but something happened, an accident, or like pandemic was a good example. Let's say from one day to the next you could not execute your plan as you had planned. What do you do then, right? So you could just be like totally frustrated, angry, etc., all the things, fearful, which would not allow you to act. They would freeze you. They would create a downward spiral of negativity, and research has shown that negativity, this downward spiral of negativity, in personally in a person, but also in a team, in an organization, in a family, whatever, is does not help the person. It creates the opposite. It makes the person less resilient, which means less able to overcome adversity, to deal with adversity, to persevere in the face of setbacks and so on. Now, it's also known that if you can cultivate positivity, which means that the feeling of positive emotions, if you can balance it more, and feel more positive emotions despite the negative thing that happened, you become more resilient. You become more able to deal with the adversity, to overcome it, and to deal with setbacks and overcome those setbacks. For example, by seeing new possibilities for actions that you could not see if you go into the negative spiral. Again, emotions drive behavior. It drives the emotion, drives the possibilities, what actions you can take and to choose from. And if you go in the negative spiral, the same is true for any kind of relationship. Like this have like relationship psychologists found out a long time ago that like marriages or partner like relationships that are too negative, they don't last very long. Same in an organization, right? So the point is that you can learn and cultivate positive emotions. And I want to give you an example that is very personal to me. During the pandemic, I lost two siblings, tragically. Don't need to go into the details here, but it was really a big setback emotionally to me. And but I had had this book to finish to writing. I had my clients to take care of, had my family to take care of, and so on in the middle of all this upheaval. And I consciously decided, because I knew if I go too much into the negative feelings, let's say if I grieve all the time, if I'm sad all the time, I'm not able to deal with life. So I said, but I need to grieve. So I allow myself, I give a little bit time every day to grieve. That's my time. But then for the rest of the day, I also tap into sources of positivity that create a better balance so that I'm overly more positive, so that I enjoy, for example, time with my family, that I go out in nature and do a walk, or that I listen to music, or whatever the source of positivity is. And I was able to balance it out, and that made me more resilient. And I was able to deal with all the challenges that I was facing in that moment. The same is true for a leader in an organization, to find that balance and find those sources of positivity for him or herself, but also help his team or his organization to to create positive experiences, right? The way he or she shows up, the way the events or activities that are created around it, and so on. And this is again not about toxic positivity. It's about the real feeling of the real balance between the negative things that happen and the positive feelings, and by tapping into sources of positivity and cultivating them.
Wow. I guess the first thing I would say is my condolences to you and your family.
Thank you.
That's it's not ever easy showing up on a podcast with someone you met not less than an hour ago and share that type of story with. Um, and then the same
Yeah.
thing. I appreciate the toxic positivity because that 100%, and that those things do exist, and unfortunately they're worse than being negative. I would say they're even more toxic than toxic organizations per se, because people show up thinking this is all great, but the reality is it's not great. And there's a lot of, the trust erodes from people who've been around for a long time, and so on and so forth. And I'll share a personal story similar to yours. That I remember I was on a leadership course, one of my last ones actually, and I was supposed to give a presentation. And literally, right before I walked in to give the presentation, one of my instructors hauled me aside and let me know that a friend, mentor, colleague of mine had passed away while on operations. And I was like, wow. I was like, did not expect that, right? But it was like, okay, well, how can I honor him? How can I, And it's like, what, go and rock this thing. So that's pretty much what I did. Kept positive outlook, and because he was a super positive guy, let me tell you, he was always good for a laugh, and so on and so forth. But just grab the positivity of the negative situation out of it and move forward with it. Now, obviously, every day we don't have these huge events going on in our lives in the workplace, but I think for the leader out there, the point is that every challenge provides an opportunity. And our jobs as leaders is to find that opportunity and look at that and highlight that and bring that to the forefront for the positive aspects of it. And that then in turn can inspire our teams and keep them going. And another story I'll wrap up with here is I interviewed the CEO of a smaller company. Actually, I was just talking with him and asking him, just chatting, and we were talking about the financial crash in 2008. And And I asked him about it, and he said, I'm like, how did it impact his business? And of course he said it was huge. Like overnight business dried up because it was a printing company. So companies stopped printing flyers and brochures and all this stuff, and all of his orders dried up. But he said, I gathered a team. I let them know what the situation was. And then I told them, I will not let one of you go, and we'll get through this together. I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to do it. And lo and behold, they got through it, and he didn't let one single person go, despite all the challenges that they occurred. So such a great story. It was a great chat with that gentleman. Reiner, this has been a great conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Although we are going to wrap up here as we're hitting up on time. I do got a couple last questions for you. The first being a question I asked all the guests here at the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast is, according to you, what makes a great leader?
Yeah, I would say the things that I said before, that somebody is able to envision a future, an aspirational future that really overcomes the issues and needs that the people are dealing with, that the leader has committed to serve. Okay, and being able to influence the behavior of people in a way that helps to make that vision come through. So it's those two things. Obviously, it takes a great understanding and empathy and compassion and so on. But at the essence, it's about being a visionary leader and being able to mobilize people to make that vision a reality by influencing their behavior.
Awesome. Love it. And a follow question of the show is, how can people find you, follow you? Shameless plug. It's all about you now.
Yeah. So if people are interested in emotion-based leaderships, and the book is available, Aspire: 7 Essential Emotions for Leading Positive Change, no matter where you are. You can get on Amazon. You can also contact me or find out more on my website, reinerlomb.com. And there you can also get access to the book. But I'm also on LinkedIn when people want to follow me there, and I share a lot there, and Facebook as well, and Twitter and those places. But LinkedIn is my primary place where I share every day and so on.
And for you, the leader, it's easy as always. Just go to lead.boss.com/236. Links are in the show notes. Reiner, again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule talking to us today. It was a fantastic conversation.
It was a great pleasure, Scott.
And that's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. But you know what you could do to truly support the podcast? And no, that's not leaving a rating and review. It's simply helping a friend. And that is helping a friend by sharing this episode with them if you think this would resonate with them and help them elevate their performance level, whether that's within themselves, their teams, or their organization. So do that. Help me, help a friend, win-win all around. And hey, you look like a great friend at the same time. So just hit that little share button on your app, and then feel free to fire this episode to anyone that you feel would benefit from it. Finally, there's always more. There's always more lessons around being the highest performing leader that you can possibly be, whether that's for yourself, your team, or your organization. So why don't you subscribe? Subscribe to the show via movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And until next time, lead, don't boss, and thanks for coming out. Take care now.